Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome in. So glad to see everybody here tonight. Excited for the opportunity to take a break from in the middle of the week and be able to come together and enjoy each other's company and fellowship and to study God's Word together. And we're grateful that you're here with us on this beautiful evening. Tonight, we're going to start with a quick thought from Psalm 85. Psalm 85. If you'd like to open up to that, Psalm 85. A quick devotional thought. This is a psalm that is recounting what God has done for His people. And so just to make quick work of it, if you'd like to follow along with me, we're going to read this psalm together as we get started this evening. Psalm 85. Lord, you showed favor to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave your people's guilt. You covered all their sin. You withdrew all your fury. You turned from your burning anger. Return to us, God of our salvation. Abandon your displeasure with us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger for all generations? Will you not revive us again, so your people may rejoice in you? Show us your faithful love, Lord. Give us your salvation. I will listen to what God will say. Surely the Lord will declare peace to His people, His faithful ones, and not let them go back to their foolish ways. His salvation is very near those who fear Him, so that glory may dwell in our land. Faithful love and truth will join together. Righteousness and peace will embrace. Truth will spring up from the earth, and righteousness will look down from heaven. Also the Lord will provide what is good, and our land will yield its crops. Righteousness will go before Him to prepare the way for His steps. These words may be a little bit familiar to you. If you were in class on Sunday morning, a person sitting right over here in class raised their hand and made the comment about this last part of this psalm. And it so intrigued me in realizing that I had not read that psalm in a long, long time that I spent a little time reading over this psalm. And it's really a fascinating study in the people of God, the nation of Israel, recounting what God has done for them and looking ahead to what God is going to do for them. In verses 1 through 3, it's the section of restoration. It's a section of remembrance. It says, Lord, you were favorable to your land. You restored, past tense, the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave, past tense, the iniquity of your people. You, past tense, covered all their sins. The basis upon which this psalm is built is a time of reflection. Remember what God has done. Remember all that God has forgiven us. Remember all that God has blessed us with. Remember how He in the past has proven Himself reliable. And then it moves into the present tense. In verses 4 through 8, it shifts from past tense to present tense. And it talks about what we're wanting in the moment. Will you not now revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Verse 6. From the past, remembering, God, here's what you've done. Here's how you've blessed us. Here's how you've forgiven us. And God, in this moment, won't you come and bless us again? Won't you revive us? Won't you restore us? Won't you bring this sense of connection with Him? What's so cool about this whole story is it comes in a bad time for the people of Israel. It comes in a bleak moment. And nowhere in here is this psalmist talking about how what I really want is for you to make all the bad things go away. What he's talking about is I want to be closer to you. You see, I think that when we're in the middle of a really difficult situation, one of the things that we most need is not necessarily for all the problems to eradicate, but for us to have closeness with God. Because if we have closeness with God, we can endure and weather and move through whatever those challenges are. And the people here are realizing that. This is what you've done, 1 through 3. This is what we need you to do for us again, God. And then 9 through 13, here's what is going to happen in the future. His salvation is near. Steadfast love and faithfulness meet righteousness and peace, kiss one another. He's talking about these are the results. This is what we can look forward to. This is what the better tomorrow looks like. And in this, we have this picture of the people remembering, requesting, and then rejoicing of what God is going to do. And it's really a great psalm because it just gives us a beautiful picture of a way that we can connect with God. Are you in a hard time? Is there a difficult moment? Are you in a challenge? Then I would suggest that what this psalm tells us is think back to the times that God has gotten you through. Think back at the times that He's showed up and showed out in your life. Think about the times that He's answered prayers and blessed and forgiven. And that'll give you strength to face the challenge of today. And there is a challenge, if there is a challenge today, that second part of the psalm speaks to that. A heartfelt request to say, God, I'm in a difficult time, and what I need more than anything is to be close to you right now. What I need is communion with you. Even more than eradication of my problems, even more than comfort, what I need most is your presence in a very real way. And then he concludes by saying, because I know what you have done, because I know who you are, I know that good things are coming. I know that you're going to bring great things in the future. I know this. Restore, verses 1 through 3. Revive, verses 4 through 8. And reconcile, verses 9 through 13. Which made me think, where's Bishop at? Bishop has disappeared. See, this is very fitting. Because Bishop walked in and he saw the song up here and he goes, oh, you're doing the devotional. Do you want me to do the song? And I said, yeah, do the song. But I'll do the song. And this song made me think of this song. And so if you know it, sing out loud with us as we sing it together. Restore my spirit, Lord, I need restored. My heart is weary, please help me, dear Lord. I stand in need of more strength from your word. Renew my love, my faith, oh, restore my soul. Hold on a second. There is something wackadoodle going on with my clicker here. And you know what it is? User error is what it is. Let's start with verse 2. Yeah, thanks, Bishop. You missed it. But revive the fire, Lord, deep in my soul. Stir my desire to work in your fold. Light in my heart, dear God, your zeal grown cold. Renew my love, rebuild my faith, oh, restore my soul. Renew my courage, Lord, it needs restored. My cup is empty, refill it, dear Lord. Replace all doubts and fears with faith so bold. Renew my love, rebuild my faith, oh, restore my soul. Amen, amen. A couple of announcements here before we head off to class tonight. Run through a few things. There are still some bulletins in the back. I hope that you have been looking over the Tuesday memo that you got on email. Has some updated information, but a few things that I want to go through with you. Not in the bulletin, and I don't think it's in the Tuesday memo. I don't remember seeing this. This coming Saturday is a work day at camp. For anybody who would like to be a part of that, Scott Folkert and Jesse are going to be taking some people down to do some preparation for summer camp season to start off at camp. And so if you're interested in helping out with that, I know they would appreciate that. Talk to Scott Folkert or Jesse Bryant if you're interested. We have our Mother's Day banquet coming up very quickly upon us. That'll be here on May 10th. Excuse me. And also on May 10th is our next go-to teams. The men's go-to teams are meeting also on May 10th. So keep those on your calendar. I want to make sure that everybody is aware. I think most everybody knows by now, but our new Journey Group cycle is starting this coming week. And so I just really would encourage you, if you have not yet signed up for a Journey Group, to stop by the bulletin board right outside these doors. Small group ministry, we have, I think, 8 different small groups going, six or 7. Patty, how many do we have? We have 9. 9 different options. Small group Bible studies that are taking place all through the week, all kinds of different studies, all kinds of different activities to be a part of. So would really encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, sign up on the bulletin board back here. Pick up one of these pamphlets. You can look at all the different offerings, where they're being held, what time they're being held, what day they're being held. And you certainly should pick the one that fits for you. But the one that's going to be meeting at the church building at 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings is going to be a real kicker. So just saying. Also want to make sure that everybody knows we have this coming Sunday is our ministry leaders meeting. quarterly ministry leaders meeting. So everybody who is working in any of our ministries, all of our deacons, all of our ministry leaders, volunteers, anybody and everybody who would like to come is certainly welcome to do that. And we're going to be having a special time of prayer as we are gearing up for this new quarter in our ministry leader cycle and looking to the future for the great works that are going to be going on. So hope that you'll be there for that, and we look forward to that very much. I did get one update that I wanted to share with you, and I have permission to do this, that Ryan and Shelley are continuing to make good progress in their hopeful adoption. And so very excited for that. We thought there was a potential setback, another petition family member that kind of had stepped in as a possible, possibly impediment to that process. But that was been ruled out, and May 8th is their next court date. Very, very excited for them. So keep them in your prayers as they're moving along to this. Any other updates that we need to make? Any prayer requests? Anything that you'd like the family to know? Any way we can be support to you? Okay. Well, I'll close us out in a prayer then, and those of us that are remaining here, we'll begin class in just a moment. Those of you that are heading on to one of the other classes, you can be dismissed after this prayer. Let's pray together. Dear God, we thank you for this beautiful, beautiful day you've given us. It's a wonderful reminder of your glory and your creative majesty, and we are so thankful for all the beauty that each new season brings. God, we're thankful for each and every person that's here tonight, for all the families, for the opportunity that we have to take a break from a busy week, to be able to come together and just to be together, to recharge and connect with one another. But most of all, God, that we can dig into your word. We can feed upon it, and we can be nourished and strengthened. We pray, God, that you'd be with those that are on our sick list. There are many that are in our hearts right now that are awaiting surgeries, waiting procedures, and have prognosis still to be determined. There are those that are recovering from illnesses and those that are working through disease right now. And all of these situations are near to your heart, Lord, and we just pray your hand of blessing upon them. All the activities going on here, many, many things that are taking place at this church and in this community, that we just ask you to be with and direct us and guide us as we are moving forward for your kingdom. And all this we ask in your Son's name. Amen. Oh, I forgot something. Speaking of, I wanted to mention that last week was Mission Sunday. And so if you have not yet seen the most up-to-date number that I have for Mission Sunday, we had a goal for $14,000 was our goal. The last number that I saw this afternoon was $14,321.10. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are dismissed to class. Well, good evening, everybody. We are back and on track with our study. On Wednesday nights this quarter, we are studying Stories from the Mountaintop. Stories from the Mountaintop. And tonight, I would direct you to Matthew chapter 17. Matthew chapter 17 is where we're going to be spending some time this evening as we address our next story on the mountaintop. We're going to be looking at the first 8 verses of this chapter. Matthew chapter 17. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured in front of them, and his face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with them. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. I will set up 3 shelters here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down and were terrified. Jesus came up and touched them and said, "Get up, don't be afraid." And when they looked, they saw no one except Jesus alone. This, of course, is the Mount of Transfiguration. Very, very, very well-known story. In fact, a story that's told in several of the Gospels, and each one gives a little bit different, some different details about it. But it's an interesting story in a lot of ways. First of all, from the very beginning, we have a point of confusion that is good for us to address. Here in Matthew chapter 17, it says, after 6 days. But if you were to look at this same story that's found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, it says, about 8 days after this, Jesus said. And so Matthew says after 6 days, and Luke says about 8 days after Jesus left. And so from the very moment we get started, I'm already in a point of contention. I've got a problem. Was it 6 or was it 8? I don't know what to make sense of that. And what's interesting about that is what we have here is a colloquial phrase that is hard for us to translate. It's a colloquial phrase. You guys are familiar with that. If I say he sold the farm or kicked the bucket, you know what I mean. But if you translate that into French, they're going to be like, what in the world is he talking about? It's a phrase that we understand. The actual phrase in Greek is about a week. It literally means about a week. That was the phrase they used when they weren't trying to give you a specific amount of time. And you and I say stuff like that all the time. Mine is the other day, which to me, the other day can be 3 days ago. It can be 12 and a half years. The other day is an indiscriminate amount of time, and that's kind of what this is too. So what we have here is 2 authors. One is using a specific date, a specific number of days, and the other says, this is Matthew's account, a phrase that means about a week in this rough period of time. So it's not a problem. It's just a little bit of an interesting bit of linguistics. It says there next that he took these 3, Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, and John. Now, just tell me for a second, what do we know about Peter, James, and John? Yep. Peter, James, and John, inner circle. Peter, James, and John got to see and experience a lot of things that many of the apostles did not get to do. Very good. Anything else jump out to you? Peter, James, and John. Fishermen. Yep. That's another thing they have in common, right? Oh, I knew that one. Peter, James, and John were among those who were fishermen. There were others, but they were among those who were fishermen. Yeah, they come from the same region. They probably come from the same town. So there's several different connections with that. And it's always been a curious thing as to how it was that Jesus determined these 3 were going to be the closer ones. He had his apostles, and then sometimes he would have a smaller group, and then sometimes he would have this smallest, most intimate group. And the best I can kind of guess about this as I look at the different stories that kind of highlight these characters, one of the things that I think is probable, and this is widely understood, is that these were 3 young men that he was pouring into in a very special way. He wanted them to experience things and see things. Maybe he saw some great potential in them. Maybe he saw something special in them. Maybe there was some specific attributes that he saw that were, worthy of a little bit extra attention. Maybe these were just three that he was particularly connected with. He just had a closer tie to them. So it could have been for the purpose of building up a skill. It could have been because that was who he was connected with. I found this week that I thought was really fun. I've never heard of this, but one commentator says he typically brought these three along because these were the three that needed the closest supervision. He couldn't leave them alone. He knew that if he left them alone, they would stir up trouble. And so he just kept them close at hand. And having three that I keep close at hand regularly, I can relate a little bit to how that is. I personally think that what we probably have here is just these are three that he was particularly close to. And so he invited them along to see this. Next thing it tells us is he led them up on a high mountain. Doesn't say what mountain. Doesn't say what mountain. There are three that historically have been suggested this might have been. It might have been Mount Tabor, which is on the way from Caesarea to Capernaum. But it's not really very high. But that is a traditional location for this. The other possibility is Mount Hermon. This is the one that is most commonly attributed to this particular story. It is very high. But one of the commentators said that the problem with that is this time of year, if they had gone to the top of the mountain, that it would have been so incredibly cold that it would not have been a very hospitable. It's 9,300 feet. I mean, it's big. It's up there. The other possibility is Mount Myron, which is the highest mountain in its particular area. Again, between Caesarea and Capernaum, the same region. It's in that same location. But it's only about 3,900 feet high, and it's more centrally located. So a lot of people say that that one is possible. It really doesn't matter, but I just bring that up because most of the time, as we've been talking about mountaintop stories, I tell you what mountain it is. And here, we're not exactly sure. So moving from the mountain, we'll really get into the story. And that begins this way. Without any build-up or anything, he just drops right into it. Verse 2. He was transfigured in front of them. He was transfigured in front of them. Now, before we get too far into this, you tell me, as you've read this story before, if you studied this, as you have given thought to this, what do you believe this to mean, that he was transfigured? What kind of imagery, pictures, what things have you learned and pieced together as to what you think this means? Do I? Okay, yeah. I kind of get a picture of that too, like a shimmery, and there's obviously there's what we do know clearly is that he was shining. He was shining very brightly. Very good. Yeah. What else comes to mind for you? What else have you kind of pictured in your mind about this? The word there, transfigured, comes from the same root word. You're not surprised that the word transform comes from. Metamorpho is the word in Greek. Metamorpho, which I'm sure you're starting to piece together what that sounds like that we have in our language. Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. And metamorphosis, of course, is the process by which a caterpillar goes into what we used to call a cocoon, but I think today they call a chrysalis, and then comes out in time as a butterfly. And it is a radical transformation. It is something that is so incredibly different from what it goes in that comes out completely different. And I think for the longest time, that was more my picture of what this was. That this was something that was an absolute radical change of appearance, as much as a caterpillar crawling along becomes a beautiful butterfly that flies away. But when I got to reading this a little bit more and studying it this week, one of the things that kind of puts a little bit of a hitch in that giddy up is they still recognized him. They still clearly knew it was him. It wasn't that they were worried that he had disappeared and somebody else completely was there. And then look down with me also, because this is a curious thing. At the end of verse 2, his face shone like the sun. It was still his face. It was still his distinguishing features. It was still his visage, to use the old-fashioned word. It was still him. So it wasn't a change in form, like from a caterpillar to a butterfly, but it was a change in degree. When you think about how much change there is between a caterpillar and a butterfly, that is how much change it was without changing the form. I don't know if I'm being very clear on that. But what that really says to me is it was identifiable. He was clearly still himself. He was still in his physical body. But he was so radically different that the only thing that the authors could really kind of piece together is that it was just bright like the sun. Bright like the sun. We've actually had this rare sighting today in the Central Ohio gray, this big yellow ball that has appeared, and to look directly into it is, it's uncomfortable, if not downright impossible. And that's the picture that I'm getting here, is that when it says it shone like the sun, it's talking about a brightness that can almost be felt, that's so overpowering that makes it very difficult to look into, like looking into the very sun. What's cool about this is I've always had this story backwards. I've always had this story backwards. And here's where you guys are going to be like, well, duh. You do this for a living and you didn't get this? I've known this since I was 9. So if that's really how this is going to be, just spare my feelings. I'm sensitive. But I always had pictured that there was a miracle that happened in this moment. In actuality, it was a miracle that had stopped for a moment. I believe that what we probably have here is a picture of what he was. And what had been transpired for the last 30 plus years was a miracle to keep that hidden, to keep that shrouded. The miracle, and I'm speaking Jeff's opinion, big sign, but it seems to me that what's probable here is that the miracle was not him changing. The miracle was that he had been miraculously shielded. He had been we weren't able to see this. But my belief in this is that that's always how he was appearing. That's what he was. It's not a new miracle, but the cessation temporarily of an ongoing miracle. That all of this time, the majesty and beauty and resonance and radiance of Jesus has been restrained, has been hidden from us. And in one moment, God says, brace yourself. I'm going to let you see what this really is. And it's just incredibly overwhelming to the point that we're going to see in a minute, they're just speaking out of their heads. They're completely scrambled. And it is an absolutely wild event. But more and more I'm of a belief that is, in actuality, the real Jesus. That is the real depiction. And he had been, shielded sort of for our protection through this whole thing. Now, that may be the way you've always thought about it. That may be new to you. You may look at that and go, that's complete hokum. But wherever you are on that, I don't really want to get into an argument about those details. But just talk to me a second about this moment of Jesus appearing in this form, specifically from the standpoint of why? Why do you think? Either God miraculously imbibed him in that moment with some kind of a visible presence of glory, or if he had always had it and he was allowed to show it in that moment. Why? Yeah. Radiant. Yeah. That's an absolutely perfect connection there to something else we do know. And I love to do that. On something that I'm not sure of or something that I really want to know, I like to connect it to something that's more clearly understood. And when you go and look at Jesus' return, Jesus is descending, Jesus is being seen by all, it's clearly something that is making a scene. And what we're seeing described here certainly sounds a lot more like that, doesn't it? That's a great connection. Thank you for that. Very good. Why else might this have been?
I think maybe to strengthen their faith because, Jesus was getting, toward the end of his ministry. And they were going to have to
I think that's a very good point. I think this would have been really, infusing a dose of faith, a realization of who he was. There would have been a clarity about, what I'm seeing with my own eyes and witnessing this and understanding more of this glory that he has, especially when you talk about a really hard time to come. There's very, very difficult days ahead. I mean, everything from this through this whole section is part of that resolutely set his face towards Jerusalem talk, where he knows where he's going. He knows what's awaiting him. And everything he's doing on this part of his ministry is specifically, I won't say everything is specifically, but there is a clear focus on making sure that those close to him, his apostles, know what's coming and understand that they need to have faith for these difficult times. And so I think there's a very good truth to that, very good possibility for that. Carol. Yeah.
And so this is something that they can embody within the three of them, so
Yeah.
sitting with faith on it.
Yeah. That whole, there are several times in the ministry of Jesus where he'll do something, or in this case, show them something, and then say, don't tell anybody about this. And there's always been a puzzling kind of thing about that. Early on in the ministry, it seems like a lot of that is Jesus is trying to sort of contain his reputation a little bit. He wants to be able to move from town to town. He wants to be able to really connect with people. And once the news gets widespread, then it's all multitudes all the time, and he doesn't have the kind of flexibility. So I think there's part of that. Also, he can't, in the middle of his ministry, he can't let people know too much, because as the hostility is starting to amp up, he can't do anything to speed up the timetable. Jesus is working off a very meticulous timetable, and it needs to all fall together properly. So I can't have anything speeding it up. But at this point, the process is it's spinning out. I mean, there's already conspiracy going on. It's already on track. It's an interesting thing that he says, don't tell anybody about this. Carol brings up one good possibility, and that is that this is something for them. This is something specifically for you. I want you to have this experience because I want you to have a bolstering of your faith, and this is something special for you. I don't know what other possibilities there might be, but I'm sure there are other thoughts. Jesse, what were you going to add? Yeah. I think I think you're stepping into an absolutely beautiful comparison, because when you talk about the story we talked about with Moses on a mountain and the story we talked about with Elijah on a mountain, one thing they both have in common is a supernatural fire, a supernatural light. And they both have that in common. And here, on a mountain again, a supernatural light, those two are connected to that. And I think that there's some really interesting kind of aspects of Moses and Elijah and how their stories weave into this, that miraculous light fire is definitely a big part of that. Big part of that. Yeah. Yeah, they have name tags. Hello, my name. It's you just have to look really. It's just really small print. You just got to look really close. No, that's a great question, and that's a question that I've asked too. How did they know? How did they know this was Moses and Elijah? How did they know who they were? And yeah, I mean, it seems to me that the most logical explanation is that was something that was revealed to them, that they do what? They introduced them. Yeah, maybe so. Hi, Moses. In my mind, Moses sounds a lot like Elvis. Yeah. 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 I absolutely 100% agree with that, and I think that's probably the I mean, certainly God did reveal it, but I think the way in which God reveals it is giving us an insight that we will have when that day comes. I think that absolutely when we get to heaven, we will have a knowledge of who these people are, and we'll get back to that in just a moment. Make sure I don't forget to come back to that, because later on in my notes, I've got a part that I want to touch on there. Yeah. Uh-huh. Good point. Yeah, I mean, well, and there's an interesting little series of pronouns that are clarifying in that regard when we get to the end of this that I think is important. The point that he's making, and I think it's a good one, is that Moses and Elijah were talking with Jesus. We don't have in this the subject of their discussion. Luke's account tells us a little bit about what they were talking about. But it very well could have been that what they were able to piece together, clearly that's Moses. Clearly that's Elijah, based on what they were saying there. And the other thing he said that is very, very possible is that Moses and Elijah may have been speaking with the collected group. And so those things have to come into account. The reality is, while we can't pin down this is the one thing, I think it is very clearly true. As Jan said, God reveals truths to people. As Josh pointed out, I believe that's going to be one of the things that God reveals to all of us when we are in our resurrected state, when we're on our eternal bodies. I think that will be part of it. And clearly, Ethan, the subject matter of the conversation could have brought clarity to their identity. What is undeniable is they knew exactly who these guys were. They knew exactly who they were. And I just want to put a note out there. I still am not giving up on the name tag. I still think that's a logical possibility. Moses and Elijah. Oh, before I get off of this, I want to hit one more thing that I thought was curious. There is a speculation that this isn't the only time in Jesus' ministry, in Jesus' recorded history in the Gospels, that he allowed his true self to be seen. Can you think of what might have been the other time? I would never have got this, but it's a cool idea. Can you think of another time that this same experience of Jesus' full glory might have been seen? Okay, there's a possibility for that. That wasn't the one that I had read about, but I love that. Jesus' appearance in the upper room. He was in his resurrected body. He was clearly different, and yet still himself. Still had the scars, still had the wounds, and yet he was different. So it could be that was showing his resurrected body. Were you going to say, Jason? Oh. Okay, yep. Great. I see that too. Not the one this guy brought up, but I think that's a good one. His baptism. That's another great one, Joy, but there wasn't anything in his appearance necessarily that I know that we can see in this same light. Ooh, that was a bad choice of words. In this same vein, in that. But the one that this commentator brought out that I went back and looked at and I'm like, that is a cool idea. In the garden of Gethsemane, the crowd, the mob comes. You remember the scene? Judas is in the front and Jesus says, "Who are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he says, "I am he," depending on your translation. And it said they were blown back and fell down. Blown back and fell down. And then they get up and he says again, "So who are you here for?" They say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And that's when there is a vein of thought out there that in that moment, God let everyone see this is who this really is. And again, we're not going any farther down that road, but I'll tell you, when I have always wondered, why did they why were they blown back and fall down? You know, earthquake, wind, you know, what's going on here? Obviously, something miraculous has taken place. An entire horde of people don't simultaneously find themselves thrown back and laying on the ground without something have happened. But I tell you, if I'm coming to arrest somebody and that happens, that'd blow me back. I'd be on my butt. That would be a really, really cool moment. Not for me, but to witness somebody else. So, speculation, but a cool thing. Yeah, a little dimmer switch. Yeah. He's different. Yeah. He's different. Yep. And I would also say, in your dimmer switch analogy, I don't know necessarily that this is full power. I don't know that that necessarily is still there. Yeah. That's a great thought. That's a great thought. That would have been how Elijah and Moses would have been used to seeing him. And so he was displaying himself in the way that they would have always seen him and known him. That's a great thought. I love that. I love that. It is interesting. Two things. I'll just get off of this. John and Peter, both later, when writing epistles, years and years after the fact, Peter wrote the words, "We beheld his glory." And John wrote the words, "We are eyewitnesses of his majesty." Literally, in this moment, in this very moment, those words find complete fulfillment. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I think clearly for our benefit, for their benefit, but I think for our benefit. Two of these guys would go on to, be impacted by this to the fact that they would write about it, and James' life just cut short. Yeah, no, I'm not either, but it's a really good point. It's a really good point. And the fact that Jesus' divinity was revealed in front of common people, an audience of common people, is certainly something that sets his story apart, as if he needs anything to set his story apart, but it is. Earlier, Ethan, go ahead, you have a question. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Right. This isn't a magician. This isn't sleight of hand. Yeah. And by not having a sign, he had a myriad of signs and miracles and wonders in all kinds of different forms and all kinds of different things, displaying power and authority over every kind of force of nature and physical phenomena, and even his own presence. So yeah, I think that the cross section of all the evidence is clearly an indication that he is who he said he was. Moses lived 1,400 years prior. Elijah had lived 900 years prior. And yet, here they were, in a resurrected form. Jesus in his glorified form. There's an old saying, "What might we have been but for sin?" I wonder how much what Jesus was then is similar to what we will someday be. our resurrected bodies. It will be our faces. We will be identifiable. We will be known. We will have our own personalities. We will have our own quirks and idiosyncrasies. And yet we will be in a perfected state. We will be as if we had never sinned. And what an incredible idea that that is what we will be. And it makes me wonder if that's what we were always intended to be. What would we be if it hadn't been for sin? What would we be? And perhaps we would be a lot more like that.
I'll show my ignorance publicly.
I do it every day, Joy. Come to the dark side. We have cookies.
Where do you get the idea that we will be our personalities and our figures?
Oh, well, because we will be known as we are known. I believe that in the same way that they knew Moses and Elijah, it was a clearly identifiable person. It was someone that they knew when, and I know Rich Man and Lazarus gets a little dicey, but the brothers were remembered by, or the rich man remembered his brothers and vice versa. I think that the fact that we will be in our resurrected state, our personalities, our faces, our physical features were never the problem. That was never what we needed to be purified from. We need to be purified from sin and the effects of sin. And so to me, the most logical, reasonable explanation is that we will have our perfected physical selves, that we will see people from all times the way they were supposed to be. Now, that's where I don't know how that's going to look, because to me, that's what Jesus, after the resurrection, becomes a little bit like that. People who have known him, that his whole life, didn't recognize him when he was right there, and yet when they knew it was him, it's clearly him. And so there is a change, but it is not so drastic that it's completely unrecognizable. So I probably should have put up my big neon sign on that one, Joy, but that's very much what I believe. I very much believe that we will have a physical resurrection, that our physical resurrection will be ourselves. I think we will have our personalities. I think we will have, we... Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Well, I don't discount that necessarily, but no, I don't think that has anything to do with what our resurrected selves will look like. Oh, no. I tell you what, in the next 12 minutes, we are not going to tackle millennial theory. No, that is not going to happen. But Joy, that's something that I don't know. It's not my place to convince you of that, but I have a real affinity for the idea that when we get there, I'll know y'all, and I'll recognize you, and you'll recognize me. Yeah. And I think that it will be that we are all joyful, because the joy we will experience will be so much greater than the sorrow that we don't even notice the sorrow is there. Yeah. I think that's true. I think that's true.
Jeff, if you don't see me, you're going to hear
Yeah. So.
All right, keep on going. Frida's going to hear me.
Yeah. So when we think about all those things that we're going to be refined with, and those small nuances, I wonder how that's going to be, Edge. That'll be an interesting thing for sure. I hope that you are there and loud, because I don't want you any other way. Yeah. I believe that. Yeah. Yeah. Especially prior to sin. Because, what would they have looked like? What would they have been like if they didn't have thousands of years of sinful, burden. I mean, everything that's wrong with us, and I don't mean that like in a derogatory sense, but I mean that everything imperfect about us, the arthritis and the soreness and the diseases and the fact that we need glasses and all of these things, hearing aids, none of this was God's plan. And when sin came into the world, all this bad stuff came with it. And if we were able to see what we were supposed to be without all of those encumbrances of sin, I think we'd look a lot more like Adam and Eve, and I think it would be very different. I think we would be remarkably different. And yet, I think we'd still recognize each other. So it's kind of like this. Jesus was wildly transformed, and yet Jesus was still recognizable. And I think we will be wildly transformed. What we will yet be is not known, but we will be like him. And this is how he was, so I think we will be like him, and that's how we're going to be. All right, I'm taking too long on that, and I've only got 10 minutes left, so I got 3 more pages to cover. Let's go fast. Moses, of course, represents the law. Elijah represents the prophets. So this is, when we talk about Moses and the prophets, one of the most common expressions in the Bible, or in the New Testament, to talk about the Old Testament. They didn't call it the Old Testament. In the New Testament, they didn't call it the New Testament. They didn't call it the Old Testament. It's like in World War I, they didn't call it World War I. They didn't know there was going to be a second. So the Old Testament wasn't called that. It was often called the Law and the Prophets. The Law and the Prophets. And so Moses, personification of the law, Elijah, personification of the prophets, are here appearing on the mountain with Jesus. And it's this really powerful picture that once, in whatever way, however it was that they knew, that's Moses, that's the law. That's Elijah, he stands for the prophets. And here's Jesus. And they're talking. Luke 9 tells us a little bit more about what they're talking about. But before we get to what they're talking about, notice this. Moses and Elijah appeared to them talking with him. So, as we were saying earlier, Moses and Elijah are clearly being heard, but their attention is on Jesus. Their attention is on Jesus, which I think is significant. The representation of everything that is the law is focused on Jesus. The representation of everything that is the prophets is focused on Jesus. It is for the benefit of everyone that's there. They're hearing it. They're getting they're understanding it and being encouraged by it. But they're there for a purpose of pointing to Jesus. Other thing that's interesting about these two, there are other people we could pick for prophets, right? If I were going to just off the top of my head name a prophet, Elijah wouldn't have been my first prophet to name. I probably would have gone with Isaiah or Jeremiah. I probably would have gone with a different one. How did Moses and Elijah's deaths look different? Moses died. We are clearly told that he went up on the mountain. We had this story just the other day. He went up on the mountain and he died. Elijah didn't. Elijah didn't. If we're here when he comes back, we'll be taken up Elijah style. If we pass before he comes back, we'll go up Moses style. So not only do you have the law and the prophets, you've got the 2 modes of entering eternity right here on this mountain. Because one of them, you're going to be taken up without dying. Remember, that's the whole idea of if he comes and we're going to meet him in the sky and all that. And and the rest of us are going to, experience death and then be resurrected from that. So that's another kind of neat parallel there. It's a minor thing. But it's kind of a neat little parallel that relating to power over death, regardless of how, well, not death necessarily in Elijah's case, but the entrance into eternity is connected to and focused on Jesus, whether by death or whether being brought up alive. But now I was saying about what they were talking about. Luke 9 says that they were talking about Jesus' demise. Talking about Jesus' demise. Now, what were they talking about? I don't know. That's really all we're told. Is this them encouraging him? Is this them, relating how the law and the prophets had built up to this? I don't know. But I know that it must have been very impactful for Peter, James, and John to experience. It must have been very impactful for them. Back from the very beginning, Tim was saying that one of the reasons this miracle was allowed to be exposed to these three was for their faith. And I think that them hearing this discussion about this upcoming death of Jesus and resurrection of Jesus was something that they needed to kind of prepare themselves for, and it does this. Then Peter does a Peter thing. Peter, in the other accounts, it says he's without thinking. He had an impulsive moment. And hey, we all have a little Peter in us. We all sometimes have a little Peter in us. We shoot off at the lips before we really stop to formulate our thoughts. But Peter says, notice it says while they were still talking, Peter interrupting. Peter's jumping in the middle of this. You know, he's right in there in the center. I'm sorry, he doesn't say while he was still speaking with Peter. That's God who interrupts. But the appearance is that in verse 3, they are talking, and Peter said to Jesus. So Peter inserts himself and is like, hey, Jesus, let's do this. Let's build 3 shrines so we can commemorate this. And what Peter is doing unknowingly, without thinking, is he's saying, the law is really important, the prophets are really important, you must be really important, let's build a shrine for all 3 of you. All 3 of you. What he's projecting is a succession of important people. The law was 1,300 years ago, Moses, and then he kind of passed the torch to prophets, Elijah, and now Elijah's kind of passing the torch to Jesus, and they're like, woo, this is the next big guy. And now, boom, interruption, powerful voice from heaven. Shut up, Peter. No, this is my beloved son. This is the one. And then he ends it, hear him. Hear him. Jan, you said earlier that all Scripture is inspired by God. Really cool. Everything that God says right here in this statement comes directly from the Old Testament. In Psalm 2:7, the Father says to the Son, you are my son. Here he says, this is my beloved son. In Isaiah 42:1, the Father says to the Son, you are the one in whom my soul delights. Here it says, my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. In Deuteronomy 18:15, God, through Moses, says of the one coming, him you shall hear. How does he end it? Hear him. Everything that he says here is directly connected to things that are written about this from Scripture. And it really is a very, very powerful thing. I'm going to hit this next point real quick and then wrap up. They were scared. I would be scared. You would be scared. It would be a scary thing. This would be a frightening thing. When you are already at the edge of your rope, seeing this transformation and people from hundreds of years, thousands of years ago that are dead, and they're having this conversation, it's overwhelming. And then to top it off, this voice from heaven comes, and just go back sometime and look at when God speaks from heaven to a collected group. It's always terrifying. It's a frightening thing. And so they fell on their faces and they were greatly afraid. And Jesus is the great consoler of fear. Jesus is the great consoler of fear. Arise and do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Why were they afraid? They were afraid because his thundering voice. They were afraid because their best friend had just been wildly transformed in front of them. They're afraid because a guy 1,300 years dead and a guy 900 years dead are joining up on the mountain to have a little chit-chat, and they're sitting there watching the whole thing. And this is all very frightening. And then top it off with the fact that these 2 guys that came from the dead are telling your best friend that he's going to be dead and he's going to be all this. It's just completely overwhelming. And it's just really, really fantastic that Jesus says, don't be afraid. And when they looked up, everybody else is gone but Jesus. Into their fear, he gave his own presence. When they looked up, they only saw him. Now, I know that means they didn't see Elijah and they didn't see Moses anymore. But I think that there's something to be said for they only saw him. Peter did a good job of walking on water until he took his eyes off Jesus. And I think that it is really hard for us to simultaneously look at our fear and look at Jesus. I think that when we take our eyes off of Jesus and look at our fear, we become afraid. But I think when we turn our attention from our fear to our Savior, it's the same thing that he does right here. Don't be afraid. What to close with? What to close with? All right, I'll just say this. Stole this from a commentator. You know, I have not had an original idea in 55 years, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. Just a little interesting thought process here. What if Moses was left alone? Commentator says, some Christians today, Moses was left alone. And these are the ones that see only the law and no relationship in their Christianity. Christianity is all about law, and none about relationship. To some today, Elijah was the only one left alone because their Christianity is all about power and miracles and miraculous and supernatural. Still not about relationship. But if Jesus is truly left alone, then our Christianity starts with relationship and provides both the power and the rules. And I thought that was really, really cool. I'll close with this thought just to leave you with to go. They were afraid. He, the consoler of fear, dispelled their fear with his presence. And I just want to say, some of y'all have got fears. Some of y'all have things coming up. Some of y'all have things that are right on top of you. Some of you have challenges that you're facing right now. I do. I do. You do too. And so this lesson was one I really, really needed to hear because I've spent too much time in the last week looking at the cause of my fear and not looking at the cause of my courage. They lifted up their eyes. They saw Jesus alone. And there's no more mention of their fear. So let's let Jesus dispel our fears this week. Thank you so much for your comments. Great comments tonight. So many things that we wouldn't have talked about if you didn't bring them up. And I really appreciate it.